It's been fascinating this week to hear in many sessions, statements, and conversations what the FP 2020 movement has meant to so many of you. What's working, what's not working, what it means to have an ambitious goal, a process for commitments and accountability. We have a lot more work to do. Too many millions of women and girls are still out of reach, still waiting for services, respect, and a feeling of peace and security in their lives. As many of you well know, through FP 2020, we have a collective goal to reach 120 million more of these women and girls by 2020. It's a critical benchmark of progress in meeting the Sustainable Development Goals and universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights. We have an opportunity over the next few years to do all we can to ensure that women and girls can choose among modern methods that they want, understand, and are comfortable with. That's the true goal: 120 million additional empowered, satisfied users of contraception that people want for themselves. The FP 2020 partnership has thrived since we were launched in 2012 because of incredible stakeholder interest and engagement in this vision. We now have more than 80 commitment makers, including nearly 40 countries, with more pledges on the horizon from governments, civil society, multilateral organizations, donors, the private sector, and academia. This past year has seen the largest wave of new commitments since FP 2020 was formed after the London Summit. And existing partners are stepping up with new and increased commitments. More exciting announcements are expected imminently, a testament not only to the compelling power of the FP 2020 vision, but to the growing potential of this platform as a catalyst for change. These partners are coming forward with fresh ideas, responding to the challenge to approach our work differently to accelerate progress. They're vowing to increase their pledges, commit additional resources, reach new populations, and scale up important life-saving voluntary interventions such as postpartum family planning and long-acting and reversible methods. Building on the decades of work preceding the London Summit, we've seen the vast potential of the FP 2020 partnership to transform the lives of women and girls around the globe. By July 2015, an unprecedented number of women and girls were using modern methods of contraception, a little over 290 million across the 69 FP 2020 focused countries. Compared to July 2012, at the inception of FP 2020, there are now 24.4 million more women and girls using modern methods of contraception in these countries. So let's just take a moment to let that sink in. What an incredible effort this represents on the part of so many of you in this room and beyond. We're making progress in other areas as well. Donors are following through on commitments, and bilateral funding for family planning has increased by almost a third since the London Summit. Yet we know that country ownership is the key to sustainability. There's an everydayness about family planning that makes it challenging to keep it elevated as a top policy or funding priority sometimes. But the fact that family planning is a basic daily need is exactly why it must be thought of as part of an essential package of health for women and young people, really just a part of a continuum of respect. Everyone in this room understands that this is a fundamental truth. And it's why we've made commitments as a community to millions of women and girls who are relying on us. This week has been a great opportunity to lay down new challenges and ask ourselves, are we in fact getting this right? Are we doing all that we can? This sense of urgency to deliver on our promise has been felt across the conference and reverberates across our community. We recognize that what we do now will determine how well the sector is positioned to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and to deliver on the promise of universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Getting there will require national leadership, political will, and an enabling policy environment. Our success rests on the ability to embed our shared values and ambition at the regional, national, and subnational levels and to build sustainable and resilient systems to keep this movement going. With this in mind, I'm pleased to introduce our first group of panelists from the FP 2020 commitment-making countries who will talk about the ways their countries are taking action on the road to 2020, why family planning is important in their context, and what they see as their greatest challenges and opportunities for the future. With that, I'd like to invite the Minister of Health from Indonesia, Ibu Molek, to please join me here at the lectern. Honorable Nila Molek has been the Minister of Health in the Republic of Indonesia. She was appointed by the President this year in 2015, or last year actually, forgot that we've already turned the corner, 2015, and before that, she served as the President's Special Envoy on the MDGs from 2010 to 2014. Under her leadership, the office designed, developed, and implemented an innovative health movement that involved improving access to primary health services. Currently, she serves as a board member of PMNCH and an advisory member of the EAT Forum. As a scientist, she's authored more than 250 papers and books. Minister Molek.
Thank you. Please allow me to speak in Indonesia. Hadirin yang saya muliakan, pertama-tama saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada panitia yang telah memilih Indonesia sebagai tuan rumah untuk konferensi internasional tentang keluarga berencana. Saya ucapkan selamat datang pada semua peserta konferensi di Nusa Dua, Bali, Indonesia. Saya harap semua dapat berperan aktif dan dapat menikmati suasana Bali yang menyenangkan. Menindaklanjuti rencana aksi ICPD pada tahun 1994, kemudian diikuti dengan tujuan pembangunan milenium atau MDGs, dan ke depan dengan Sustainable Development Goals, pemerintah Indonesia telah memantapkan komitmen pada pelayanan keluarga berencana berbasis hak dan rencana pembangunan jangka menengah nasional. Sebagai tindak lanjut, Kementerian Kesehatan juga telah mengembangkan rencana aksi nasional pelayanan keluarga berencana. Pada konferensi tingkat tinggi keluarga berencana di London tahun 2012 diluncurkan gagasan Family Planning 2020 yang sejalan dengan kebijakan dan rencana strategis nasional. Oleh karena itu, kami berkomitmen untuk berkontribusi dalam pencapaian target global untuk memperluas akses informasi keluarga berencana, pelayanan KB, dan suplai alat kontrasepsi untuk tambahan 120 juta wanita di seluruh dunia. Kementerian Kesehatan dan BKKBN telah bekerja sama dalam upaya meningkatkan program keluarga berencana di Indonesia. Indonesia mencatat sejarah sukses dalam mempromosikan dan melaksanakan program keluarga berencana nasional sejak tahun 1970-an. Berbagai kemajuan telah dicapai hingga saat ini. Sebelum dikenalkan program keluarga berencana di Indonesia pada tahun 1970-an, tingkat kelahiran total fertility rate adalah 5,6. Selama periode berikutnya, penggunaan kontrasepsi sejalan dengan perubahan persepsi masyarakat mengenai jumlah anak ideal dan usia ideal menikah, sehingga menyebabkan penurunan dramatis dalam tingkat kesuburan. Dalam periode ini, tingkat kelahiran total fertility rate menurun dari 5,6 pada tahun 1968 menjadi 2,6 kelahiran per perempuan pada tahun 2012 atau turun sekitar 50%. Namun dalam dekade terakhir, Indonesia mempunyai tantangan dalam menurunkan total fertility rate dan meningkatkan tingkat prevalensi kontrasepsi CPR. Situasi ini juga berkontribusi terhadap angka kematian ibu yang masih tinggi. Angka kematian ibu di Indonesia sesuai dengan hasil sensus penduduk tahun 2010 adalah 346 per 100.000 kelahiran hidup. Diharapkan Indonesia dapat menurunkan angka kematian ibu menjadi 306 per 100.000 kelahiran hidup pada tahun 2019. Usia kawin pertama pada umumnya telah meningkat dengan bertambahnya usia pernikahan dari 17,1 tahun 1991 menjadi 20,1 pada tahun 2012. Meskipun proporsi pernikahan dini dan melahirkan dini tetap tinggi. SDKI 2012 melaporkan bahwa 9,5% dari perempuan berusia 15 sampai 19 tahun telah mulai melahirkan atau sedang hamil. Hal ini ditunjukkan dengan angka kelahiran pada perempuan usia 15 sampai 19 tahun relatif tinggi, yaitu 48 per 1000 di antara kelompok perempuan tersebut. Kondisi ini memiliki implikasi serius bagi kesehatan ibu dan bayi baru lahir. Di Indonesia telah diluncurkan Universal Health Coverage melalui skema jaminan kesehatan nasional sejak tahun 2014. Pada tahun 2019 diharapkan skema jaminan kesehatan nasional akan mencakup semua warga negara Indonesia. Pelayanan keluarga berencana merupakan salah satu paket manfaat dalam jaminan kesehatan nasional. Dalam konteks komitmen Family Planning 2020, Indonesia telah membentuk suatu komite nasional yang melibatkan berbagai pemangku kepentingan utama untuk mendukung program dan layanan keluarga berencana di Indonesia, termasuk instansi pemerintah, perwakilan dari organisasi non-pemerintah, organisasi profesi, kegiatan hak perempuan, dan sektor swasta. Komite Nasional merupakan forum yang sangat penting yang digunakan dalam berbagai diskusi, pembaharuan, pembelajaran, dan inisiatif baru yang dibahas melalui koordinasi yang lebih baik dan implementasi di semua level. Saat ini telah diselesaikan strategi perencanaan keluarga berencana berbasis hak dengan dukungan UNFPA, WHO, dan USAID, dan lain-lain. Strategi keluarga berencana ini dapat digunakan sebagai referensi dan menjadi acuan untuk memegang program dan sektor organisasi non-pemerintah, sektor swasta untuk berkontribusi dalam pelaksanaan program keluarga berencana di Indonesia. Akhirnya kami mengharap konferensi ini akan menjadi platform untuk dapat berkolaborasi lebih baik di dalam negeri maupun antar negara dalam mencapai tujuan FP 2020. Kemitraan dan donor dalam memperkuat upaya kami sangat hargai. Untuk semua panelis dan peserta, terima kasih untuk semua yang dapat hadir dalam konferensi ini, dan saya berharap konferensi ini memberikan kontribusi yang signifikan untuk revitalisasi program keluarga berencana secara nasional dan global. Terima kasih.
And now I'm honored to welcome the Honorable Jeanette Guerin, Secretary of the Department of Health for the Philippines, a leader in advancing the advocacy on maternal health and child mortality in order for the Philippines to attain its MDG goal. Secretary Guerin, a medical doctor trained in obstetrics and gynecology, successfully championed the passage of the Cheaper Medicines Act, the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Law, and other measures in Congress. A steadfast champion for various health and women's issues, let me please welcome Secretary Guerin.
Thank you very much, Beth. Her Excellency, the Minister of Health of Indonesia, other distinguished guests, fellow soldiers, generals, and comrades in the fight for women and children, good morning. I am pleased to be here to share with you all the story of the ongoing war to save women's lives in the Philippines. Not only am I proud to be a woman, a mother, and a former legislator, but more so it gives me the adrenaline to work further because they see our support group not only within the premises of our country, but most importantly, we feel the commitment and the passion of our partners, donors, other stakeholders with one voice. And that is basically pushing for a better life, not only for women, but also for children and the whole of families. I chose to use the metaphor of a continuous war, since the story of advancing reproductive rights and reproductive health in our country has been a long and arduous fight and has been replete with skirmishes and battles. I have been a legislator for 6 terms, and that's 9 years in the regional legislature and 9 years in the Philippine Congress. And over all those years, I never thought that reproductive health law will ever be passed. It was a battle after a battle, a mixture of misinformation, wrong information, political backlashing, you call it in every name. And as my term was about to finish in Congress, I realized that political will, public involvement, and the voice of our people are all part of the ingredients that propelled us to a more successful battle in pushing for reproductive health. Standing up for reproductive health in our country, in my country, is no walk in the park. By doing so, you potentially pit yourself against a politically powerful and influential Roman Catholic Church, of which 87 to 89% of Filipinos are members. The issue would usually shift and will not focus on reproductive health. Initially, that was the case. There were a lot of misinformation, but later on it shifted to other issues that would involve politicians, members of Congress, decision makers. Ultimately, if you are not on your guard, reproductive health is almost always first in political bargaining. We have been successful so far when there was the involvement of many stakeholders. But mind you, recently we had a slash and a cut. There was a budget cut in the Ministry of Health to the tune of 1 billion pesos, and that was basically for family planning commodities. When this happened, we realized that the fight never ends. Even with the passage of a law, there will always be resistance, there will always be challenges, there will always be issues that we have to tackle. In other words, we are constantly reminded to be on the guard, because leaving a legacy and working for families, working for women and children, simply means we accept the challenge throughout our whole lifetime. With the strong political commitment of our President, His Excellency Benigno Simeon Aquino III, the untiring and sustained dedication of reproductive health advocates, both in government, especially those in civil society, and sympathetic, if not strong, support of the general population, including the business sector, we were able to pull RH law from the doldrums so that it can finally move through the legislative mill. After lengthy and sometimes acrimonious debates and strong lobbying from both sides, that was always the time that despite the quorum, and when the issue of RH will always be debated and is scheduled for a debate, almost always, some legislators are pressured to get out of the conference hall. Not long after we won the battle of passing the law, we again faced the challenge of its constitutionality being questioned by the religious sector. Not more than the highest court in our country, the Supreme Court, was also torn between the debate. And we were asking ourselves, is it not that we have surpassed many generations to come across to where we are now? And why is it that even the highest court of our land and of our country seems to be afraid to touch the issue of reproductive health? Its constitutionality has been upheld. However, there was a recent issuance of a temporary restraining order not allowing the government to push forward for a program of family planning implants. The demand was so huge, the acceptance was so huge, that again, oppositors of reproductive health and oppositors of family planning were on their guards. Having overcome the tedious legislative and judicial processes in the course of fighting for a national policy for reproductive health, we are now facing the uphill battle of finally translating the intent of the law into accessible and affordable information and services to ensure that no woman dies while giving life. It is a sad thing that while governments move and continuously advocate, deliver speeches, deliver promises to eradicate poverty, not all governments and not all are committed to align poverty with family planning. Family planning is not just a right. When we fought for it in our country, we gave emphasis that it is not just a right. It's all about health, it's all about women and children, it's all about a better quality of life that each human being and each Filipino family deserves. Our country has a lot of catching up to do in reducing maternal deaths, due partly to the inconsistency by which RH services were made available in the past. It was like a cardiac tracing, you know what an ECG is. Sometimes it's up when the people are aware of it. When nobody is aware, it goes down. So it's going up and down, up and down, up and down. That is not public service. That is political. And it's not even political will. It's not even commitment. It's simply playing politics. And this was one thing that our current president and the Speaker of the House and the Senate President pushed to make not only public health affordable and available, but also to make family planning services reach in the entire islands of the Republic of the Philippines. The contraceptive prevalence rate, while increasing, is still below target. While we have around 6 million women of reproductive age with unmet need for family planning, we also realize that there is a huge health problem arising in our country, and these are the increase in teenage pregnancies. Due to the lack of proper information and services, and due to the continuous denial of many members of our sector, our children are left to get information, sometimes unreliable, often misinformation, and almost always the young teenagers who are supposed to be in school, who have yearned to earn the degree, who aspire for a better life, who aspire to be responsible mothers in the future, would end up with a teenage pregnancy, ultimately devoid of family planning services. And we always ask ourselves, how else can we convince the oppositors of reproductive health, where in fact, you can see every teenage pregnancy, every teenager ruining her life simply because her pregnancy was not planned at the proper time. In response to these concerns, the Philippine government created the National Implementation Team and Regional Implementation Teams, composed of government agencies mandated to implement the mandates of law in partnership with civil society groups advocating reproductive health. We found this not only beneficial, but also effective and efficient. Why? The Philippines is composed of 7,100 islands. That's the regular time. If it's low tide, we increase our number of islands to 7,400. But of course, only 2,000 are habitable. And that is just a replica of how difficult it is to deliver services to our people. The example of a whole of government, a whole of society approach in addressing issues that arguably cut across all sectors within and outside government has been exemplified by the National Implementation Team and the Regional Implementation Teams that we have created. This has paved way in allowing the central government to come down to the rural areas, looking for every parent, looking for every child, looking for every mother, looking for every Filipino family that is worth fighting for. This continuing collaboration hopefully will provide a much-needed impetus in helping our women attain the highest level of sexual and reproductive health. Not to mention the fact that the civil society, especially those who are output-oriented, who keep in delivering aside from their advocacies, has actually contributed a lot. It was like showing the government upright in our faces that we have them as our partners in delivering services. Under our High Impact 5 strategy, reproductive health interventions were targeted towards reaching vulnerable populations located in areas with high poverty incidence, high poverty magnitude, and areas prone to disasters. These populations need access to information, commodities, and mostly services. The war for saving women's lives never ceases, and while the obstacles sometimes may seem unsurmountable, we are strengthened by the lessons learned in pushing for reproductive health law, a strong political commitment at all levels of government, unceasing and untiring commitment of stakeholders, as I see in your faces today, and broad public support are keys to making our communities and nations more safe for our women. These lessons I am proud to share with all of you this morning. When we work and when we aspire to leave a legacy, it will never be a walk in the park. It would have been more simple to live a life all alone, mindless of what the future generations would need and what the future generations ahead would demand. But life is not like that. We are all born for a purpose. We will all born to care, to live life to the fullest by participating in leaving a legacy for our people. The bottom line of it all is that we make reproductive health a core. And by core, I mean C-O-R without the E. C stands for a commitment, O for our obligation, and R for responsibility. Let core be felt by every country, by every community, and by every family. And let us leave Bali with actions delivered, because at the end of every year and at the end of our generation, the future generations will always remember us as we leave behind a legacy of commitment, obligation, and a responsibility for a better quality of life for our women, our children, and the family as a whole. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Thank you, Secretary Guerin, for those incredibly stirring and inspiring words. Minister Molek, Indonesia has historically been a pioneering champion in family planning. I know that the ministry is implementing a national movement in family planning as outlined in Indonesia's financial and policy commitments. Can you share with us the approaches that the ministry is taking to accelerate progress? And how do the Ministry of Health and the BKKMB work together to do so?
Terima kasih atas pertanyaannya. Saya kira betul apa yang sudah tadi saya katakan, bahwa Indonesia memang pernah mengalami suatu kesuksesan dalam menjalankan keluarga berencana. Tetapi setelah kami mengalami suatu era reformasi, terjadi suatu stagnan dari family planning ini. Dan apa yang akan kita lakukan, sebenarnya ini yang akan kita pikirkan ke depan, karena kami sekarang ternyata 1 tahun itu hampir sekitar 3 juta penduduk baru yang lahir. Saya kira ini satu pekerjaan yang cukup berat. Kami sekarang sudah sekitar 250 juta jiwa lebih penduduk Indonesia. Tadi Minister dari Filipina mengatakan mereka terdiri dari 7.100 pulau. Kita ini terdiri dari 17.500 pulau. Jadi lebih sulit lagi dengan keadaan geografis di Indonesia. Dan bekerja sama dengan BKKBN tentu pasti kita harus lakukan. Pertama, bahwa apa yang dikatakan juga oleh Menteri Filipina, bahwa kita harus mencapai sampai ke daerah-daerah terpencil. Ini juga BKKBN harus bekerja sama dengan pemerintah, karena kami di Kementerian Kesehatan mempunyai pusat layanan kesehatan primer. Di sini kita mengharapkan bahwa ada pelayanan untuk keluarga berencana sampai di daerah-daerah, di distrik, sampai di daerah maksudnya daerah yang terpencil. Dan saya kira ini yang kita harus lakukan untuk bekerja sama. Dan kedua, mungkin bagi saya, mungkin selaku pribadi, juga ingin sekali untuk mengembalikan lagi untuk penggunaan keluarga kontrasepsi yang long term, bukan hanya yang dalam suntik ataupun yang singkat dalam short term ini. Saya kira ini perlu sekali. Dan masalah lain yang kita perlu perhatikan adalah bagaimana kita meningkatkan pengetahuan dari perempuan. Saya kira yang menentukan keluarga berencana ini seharusnya adalah perempuan. Karena mereka yang merasakan, ya mereka yang bisa mengerti bagaimana untuk mendidik anak-anak mereka. Karena itu saya kira betul sekali bahwa perempuan ini perlu untuk kita dorong untuk mempunyai pendidikan yang lebih tinggi sehingga dia akan dapat mengambil keputusan untuk keluarga berencana. Ini yang juga saya harapkan dari BKKBN dan Kementerian Kesehatan, kita sama-sama mendorong Kementerian Pendidikan agar anak-anak perempuan kita lebih mendapatkan kesempatan untuk pendidikan yang tinggi.
Thank you, Minister Molek. That's a compelling description of a very difficult operating environment and the challenges of expanding a mature program to include more method mix and to reach people that are living in far and difficult places to get to. You have a lot of both expansion and physical challenges in terms of getting your program to that sort of next level for women and girls, but your approach and your sincerity in that are really inspiring. Secretary Guerin, you talked about some of the same challenges and just hearing the number of islands and the incredibly diffuse physical terrain that you have to deal with, not to mention the vulnerability that you all have to incredible storms and to climate change as our world is changing. Could you share with us a bit how you're addressing some of those challenges, especially when you have a program that you're trying to grow, you're trying to reach more people, but you're often vulnerable to massive disruptions from Hurricane Haiyan and other such situations? I think we'd all like to hear a little bit about that.
You're right on that. The Philippines has been number 2, sometimes number 5 among the countries prone to disasters. But we are privileged that we have civil society, we have health partners going with us, not only in terms of implementing programs in central Manila, but also in implementing it in villages, in rural areas, where it is most needed. We look at reproductive health as part of public and promotive health care. We are not looking at it as a service that will only be made available in certain areas, but more so it's there as an option. The Philippine government has packaged reproductive health as an aspect that transcends across all sectors, be it political, economic, or social upliftment, where when we talk about uplifting poverty, when we talk about education, when we talk about giving jobs and opportunities, it all boils down to the fact, was a family given the opportunity, was a woman given the opportunity to space her pregnancy, to plan her family? Are we bringing forth planned pregnancies, wanted pregnancies? And these were all part and parcel of what the Ministry of Health is doing. It's basically being offered on a regular basis, not just in times of disaster. Because when we respond during disasters, what happens is that we address women who are trying to recover, both from the social impact as well as the economic impact. If they are not prepared to do this, because they have many children that they cannot even send to school, it defeats the purpose of all the other government programs. In fact, the Ministry of Social Welfare and Development, in partnership with World Bank and other partners, has been pushing forward for a conditional cash transfer, similar to what was done in Mexico. And so far, our government has been very successful, not only because it was implemented fully, but more so because when it was implemented, it was coined with family planning programs that each recipient family can avail of. So while the government is pushing forward for their economic upliftment and giving them opportunities, they are also given the services and the information to plan their families. We have jumped off from simply concentrating on advocacies to maximizing service delivery, because Filipinos are already aware. They are more wanting of services reaching every core, especially those who are disaster prone. And mind you, in every disaster, we notice that there is an increase in teenage pregnancy. This again is the niche and the sector that our government is currently addressing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think one of the This is an incredibly rich conversation, and I wish that we could continue to talk for quite some time this morning. One of the frustrations with conferences, we have to keep to a schedule, but I wanted to thank you both for joining us here in the plenary this morning. It's so critical that we have an opportunity to hear from the country's perspective about what your challenges are, what it is that you're facing, and why, and your commitment, I think, because it's so inspiring to see your commitment to the process, to the women and girls in your countries, and what high-level leadership, such as what you demonstrate, means to your countries and to the movement. So I want to thank you very sincerely for joining us here this morning. Thank you. So when we planned this plenary, we thought we'd try to do two different things. The first being given an opportunity to hear from some of our partners, the Philippines and Indonesia, about the challenges of expanding family planning programs, sometimes difficult political or physical or other terrains. And then we wanted to take the second half of this plenary to share with all of you a little bit more about the FP 2020 movement and some of the transitions that have taken place over time. It's been 3.5 years since the London Summit. And as you know, FP 2020 was an outgrowth of that process. And it's been fascinating through these years to live and to feel what the investment of the community and the excitement over having a global platform for collaboration has meant to the sector. And because of that, we've been sort of shifting and adapting to the opportunities and challenges as they come to us as well, both at the Secretariat and throughout our structure. So in this section, I wanted to invite some of our key partners who've been an integral part of the FP 2020 movement at various levels to join me on the stage so that we could have a conversation about where we are at this point in time. Because as we all know, we've made progress, but we've also fallen short on what we'd hoped would be our benchmark for progress as we move toward 2020 and ultimately toward 2030. So with that, I'd like to invite our partners for the next part of this plenary up to the stage to join me here in the chairs. And I'll be introducing them as they walk up and join us here on stage. So the first is Poonam Mutreja, who's the Executive Director of the Population Foundation of India. Poonam has 3 decades of experience in the socio-development sector. She's an innovator, funding organizations in the areas of social justice and programs on leadership, especially in the field of women's health. A close friend of FP 2020, Poonam has served as a valued member of our reference group. I'd also like to welcome Fatimata C., who's the director of the coordination unit of the Ouagadougou Partnership. Fatimata is a biologist, a nutritionist, and a public health specialist with over 25 years of experience in international development. She's been the director of the Ouagadougou Partnership since 2012, based in Senegal, and prior to that, Fatimata worked on various health-related projects in West Africa. Thank you for joining us, Fatimata. Next, I have the honor of introducing Ellen Starbird. Ellen is the director of the Office of Population and Reproductive Health at USAID. She provides high-level leadership of the agency's family planning and reproductive health agenda and portfolio, which is valued at approximately $600 million annually. And she directs the office's $100 million program. Ellen joined USAID in 1989, and she has spent her career in the Office of Population and Reproductive Health. And finally, but not lastly, we have Jagdish Upadhyay, who is the chief of the Commodity Security Branch of UNFPA. Jagdish, as many of you know very well, is a global leader in family planning and commodity security. He's contributed greatly to progress in many countries and to saving the lives of women, men, and young people. Jagdish has been with UNFPA for over 20 years. Prior to UNFPA, he worked in several roles in Nepal, including as executive director of a social marketing organization. So please welcome our panel. Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me here. I'm hoping that this section of the plenary will be a little bit more informal. We're all friends, and I'm hoping that we can have more of a conversation. But I wanted to invite each of you first to give a little bit of an opening comment, and so I have a lead-off question for each of you. So, Poonam, FP 2020 has placed an emphasis on rights and empowerment, since its inception. How is this perspective and the principles embodied in the partnership and the global level translated into action and change in India?
Thank you, Beth. It's an honor to be on this panel. FP 2020 is a momentum that started in 2012, where at the London summit, birth was given to FP 2020. And with the four working groups, you had the Rights and Empowerment Group. And I believe that the Rights and Empowerment framework developed by FP 2020, along with the momentum that FP 2020 built, created not just a chase of 120 million in terms of numbers. There is a framework which has been, I speak for India and I speak globally. I've attended meetings in South Asia, in Asia Pacific, where the framework is being used. And it's the rights and empowerment approach within the numbers that has significantly contributed to countries planning with a framework in mind. For instance, India, which adopted 48 million users and has taken the lead in terms of numbers making their commitment, there are three very important things India put in place. First, choice, which is very much part of the rights and empowerment framework. India has increased and recently introduced injectables after a long time into the basket of choice, and I see this as a beginning of many, many more contraceptive methods being used. Second, India has set up, quality has been a huge concern, and within, again, the rights framework, it's not just about giving quality, but counseling services and dignity. Dignity is a new word that has got added and has got conceptualized. So the government has set up a quality assurance committee. A framework is to be developed within the next 3 months. I have the privilege of serving on that committee. So there is a move in a direction which is not only chasing numbers. And finally, India also has made national plans, state-level plans, and at the lower level, which is district plans. And these plans include all these elements. I see NGOs in India, women's groups, feminist groups that weren't so involved in working on family planning. They're a big agenda, women's rights and so on is a huge agenda. But I see this added. The rights and empowerment framework has got added and put family planning on a lot of groups' agenda that didn't work on family planning. I see the framework being Indianized, as I'm sure it's being done in other countries. So the momentum that FP 2020 has put out is not only about numbers, and the momentum that the world is experiencing in terms of population momentum, which is fueled by young people, that is another area where I think FP 2020 has made a huge contribution, and there is a huge focus on young people and rights of young people in the form of, apart amongst everything else, sexuality education.
Thank you, Poonam. As always, it's a fascinating mix of issues that you're grappling with in India, and I'm heartened to know that such an incredible advocate such as yourself is leading that effort in your country. Fatimata, thank you as well for joining us this morning. The Ouagadougou Partnership, as many know, was launched in 2011 before the London Summit on Family Planning. And as a result, we've benefited from learning from your experience about what it means to have a cooperative platform that isn't a vertical funding mechanism, but is about aligning agendas, learning from each other through commonality of experience and seeing what can be done through collaboration. Can you share with us your experience in doing that with the Ouagadougou Partnership and how we've then worked together as well and what it means to have FP 2020 as a sister process to support your efforts?
Thank you very much, Beth, for giving me the opportunity to join this panel and talk about the Ouagadougou Partnership. And as you said it, The Ouagadougou Partnership was launched in 2011 and somehow and the FP 2020 in 2012. So this is why we keep saying, even being a regional movement, a regional alliance around family planning, we are the big sister of FP 2020 being a global one. So, but the fact that we have been put in place, the Ouagadougou Partnership in 2011, that made it very easy and helped us to quickly join, this global movement. Today, all the 9 countries have made commitment to FP 2020. Political commitment, programming commitment, and financial commitment to FP 2020, which is, wonderful. And we have been able, with this, to have, the 9 countries to develop country implementation, costed implementation plans, with an overall goal for the 9 countries together to reach 1 million additional users of modern contraceptives between 2011 and 2015. So 1 million is quite little compared to the overall goal of FP 2020. And I used to say that this is an ambitious goal for the West Africa Francophone countries because of, all the things that you know about in terms of indicators. And when I said 1 million, this is just, 10%, 1% of, the overall goal of FP 2020. But to reach that 1 million, each of the countries has to double its contraceptive prevalence rate within 4 years, which is ambitious. And when we set this goal and said we would like, to double the contraceptive prevalence rate within this country within 4 years, many people were very skeptical. But I can assure you that we reached this goal because last December we report on our progress and we shown that we have put between 2011 and 2015 1,180,000 women under modern contraceptive prevention. And moreover that, we have now committed the 9 countries together to reach 2.2 million additional women between 2016 and 2020, which is doubling our original goal. So, meaning that the West Africa countries, Francophone countries, are in movement. We have seen during this period of time a lot of progress in each of the countries. We've seen more and more champions for family planning around, among the civil society, including religious leaders. Youth are now voicing more and more and more about family planning. We have seen also in these countries that the government political will is increasing, and moreover, we have been able, because of our advocate that we have among those champions, seeing more investment from donors. And between 2012 and 2014, we have been able to see a progress of 30% of investment from donors in this region. So meaning that, yeah, more political will, more champions for family planning, but more support also from the donors, which is really great in more sense.
Thank you, Fatimata. Your partnership is really critical to us as well, not only because you're working in some of the most difficult terrains in the world, but also because what you're doing really represents that effort around equity, to ensuring that we get to those women who are sort of left behind by other processes that are often the hardest to reach. So I admire the work that you're doing enormously, and it's a real pleasure to be working with you to support your efforts in any way we can. Ellen, thank you for joining us as well this morning. And I want to start off by congratulating you and USAID for 50 years of leadership in the family planning field. It's really a great accomplishment. And through that 50 years, you've learned an incredible amount. You've led the community in many ways. So I'm really interested to know, from your perspective, what has the FP 2020 movement meant to USAID? What's different now through the last few years of our partnership?
Thanks, Beth. And it's a pleasure to be on this panel with Poonam and Fatimata and Jagdish, with whom I'm increasingly joined at the hip as we move forward in this together. I think the theme of this conference around the link from global commitments to local action really reflects both the spirit of how USAID does its work and what FP 2020 is all about. We're really excited to be part of this. The FP 2020 goals are quite consistent with what we see as our own goals in the agency to make it a reality for women and girls, men and boys, couples around the world to choose the number, timing, and spacing of their children for all the reasons that we know that it's a good thing to do. As a core convener and the largest bilateral donor of international family planning assistance, we are very engaged in FP 2020 at all levels, from lending our voice to global advocacy, to a seat on the reference group, to regional and country partnerships like the one described by Fatimata, the Ouagadougou partnership, to our engagement at local levels with ministries and civil society and champions for family planning. And I liked very much Secretary Garen's CORE acronym of commitment, obligation, and responsibility, and we take all of that very seriously in our participation in FP 2020. USAID has a set of 24 priority countries for family planning and reproductive health, and the additional 7 Ouagadougou countries, because 2 of the larger set of priority countries are also Ouagadougou countries. And of those, 20 of the priority countries, and as Fatimata said, all of the Ouagadougou partnership countries have made commitments to FP 2020. And more than 85% of the women and girls that FP 2020 seeks to reach are in those countries that are priority countries for USAID. So we see FP 2020 really as an opportunity to work together to ensure that rights-based voluntary family planning information and services are available throughout those countries. I think the progress made in the coming 5 years will really define the path to 2030, and the theme of the Sustainable Development Goals that has underpinned this conference, I think, is very relevant to the work that FP 2020 is doing. If we can collectively get on that path, the path to 2030 will be an easier one. There'll be challenges, no doubt, but we'll be on track to a world where the grand convergence between the developed and developing countries is a reality, and we will have made the world a better place. And I think that our engagement as USAID in FP 2020 is an important piece of helping to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Jagdish, UNFPA is a core partner as well to FP 2020. Dr. Babatunde Oshotamin is one of our co-chairs, and you continue to be involved as well in all layers of the FP 2020 movement. But also put the same question to you that I put to Ellen. What's different at UNFPA through your participation in FP 2020, and what do you hope for the future through the same partnership?
Thank you, Beth. Before I answer your question specifically, let me publicly acknowledge something that I felt last 2 days. You know, I interacted with the young people. I listened to them. I participated their meetings. And I'm pretty sure that our future is very secure with the young people taking so much of passion. And, and when young people decide to do something, they will do it. I'm sure about it. So congratulations for all the young people who are taking the torch and going ahead. Another issue that I would like to share with you, and which just this morning I was meeting with one country, without naming the country, where most of us phased out, we graduated, we say it, because the country became middle-income country. So I asked how is the progress because I was meeting with that official after 3 years. And he said, it's not very good progress. So I was really surprised because we graduated and we thought that everything going very well. And the official told me that there is only 7% of facilities have stock, 93% of facilities don't have stocks. So I said, what happened? You have a health insurance. They said, health insurance is covering only condom and pills. And I said, why other IUD, implant, and others are not there? He told me because they are device, and device are not covered by insurance. That also, the budget is cut 50%, so even pills and condoms are not fully supported. That is the middle income country. So I said, what should we do? And he suggested that sometime just spacing and limiting may not give the real message. We need to talk dignity, right, the poverty, the family, and the future of the family. I think that our message should go in a so comprehensive ways that it can help. And I think SDG is giving that opportunity to us. So for us, for UNFPA, you know, MDG took 7 years to talk family planning, but SDG is the real opportunity where every government is making investment case. I will urge everyone to think that the girl in Nepal or any country, she is 15 years, in the next 15 years, she will be 30 years. What kind of opportunity, what kind of rights that we have to give that the country becomes more economically powered. That's what the demographic dividend is all about. So in terms of UNFPA valuing FP 2020, before FP 2020, we all used to do our work. There was some progress. But I think this synergy that we bring by FP 2020, where concrete examples are there. For example, I mean, yesterday we heard about global financing facilities. This community has worked so strongly to place family planning in GFF that it is a part of global financing facility. The family planning has become the core issues. That's a concrete example. There are many other examples that I don't want to go in the list, but there are many countries where it was going to the stock out of contraceptives, and we worked together with the civil society, with the young people, with the government, with the policymaker, and we averted those stock out. I think this partnership is really giving us a platform that we all can be together, because the family planning is not one agency work. It is the work of everyone, and everyone who is here is our shared responsibility if we want to see this 15-year-old girl in next 15 years takes the charge of her whole family and decide about herself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagdish. You're inspiring as always. We have time for one more round of questions, but it's going to have to be a bit of a speed round, but I want to make sure that we hear from each of you one more time. Poonam, you talked a bit about expanding the method mix in India, and I think that's a really exciting transition to more opportunities for women to space their births. Can you give us a little bit more about what's happening there and what we can expect will be coming in the coming months?
So the first thing is that, as I said earlier, the government is very conscious that rolling out the new method that has just been approved in India, injectables, to name it, we are preparing in India for providing high-quality technical services. Counseling is being introduced. Sadly, it didn't exist. Counseling for family planning did not exist. So counselors are being trained, and evaluations have been done of counselors and how they're working to do the aftercare. Now, every contraceptive has a side effect. In fact, multiple side effects, including, as I always say, abstinence too has side effects, which we haven't measured. But so in India, what we are at, the stage we are at is the preparatory stage of rolling out the contraceptive. There is a technical advisory committee that has been set up again in the Ministry of Health. There is injectables had been introduced in the private sector before. So the experience of the private sector is being leveraged by the government, and rightly so. And NGOs are getting ready to track the government. We want to make sure, not only the government wants to make sure, but it's important that we as civil society who've advocated for choice must ensure that the technical expertise exists and aftercare exists and the side effect management exists. But I don't see injectables as the end. I just see it as the beginning of expanding choice. And we expect that women won't have only choice, but women will have voice, because it's not a question of just seeing women as reproductive machines producing babies or stopping to produce babies. It is about women's empowerment, and we see it as a concrete way to empower women. And I think the global community and people in India really have to welcome that the government has begun. There are trials going on other contraceptive methods, and if we just bring injectables and think that will solve the problem, that is not enough, and quality has to be, and tracking. One of the working groups, FP 2020, and several of the international initiatives in tracking numbers, quality, rights, dignity, that is another area that's going to really help us in tracking. Just a 4 to 6% increase is what injectables could bring, but India needs a 13% increase in contraceptive prevalence. So I would say, I think the government is ready, and we should be ready to work with the government on bringing additional methods beyond injectables.
Thank you, Poonam, and that is no small undertaking. I think to increase MCPR by 1% in India, you have to add an additional 3.3 million users. So we're talking about vast numbers, an immense system, and to maintain that quality and to build that into the program as well as what you talk about is an enormous undertaking. So thank you for sharing that perspective. Fatimata, I'd love to hear more from you about what specific interventions are really taking hold and allowing that kind of growth and that ambition that you've seen within more growth for the Ouagadougou Partnership region. What's working there?
Thank you. So Beth, before I answer this question, I would like to ask, this audience to join me to congratulate the 9 countries of the Ouagadougou Partnership for the incredible work and progress they have made. I think this is fabulous and exciting. Despite the progress that we have made, we still have to tackle many of the issues that the Francophone West African countries are facing with, including the fact that we have still a large number of women who need family planning and cannot access. Unmet need for family planning is still huge. So our priority for the next, the coming period would be to go back, because now we have committed and set a new goal, being 2.2 additional users of family planning. So we're gonna go and revisit our costed implementation plan, and we're gonna generate what we have called the second generation of costed implementation plan. That will focus mainly in scaling up the best practices that we have implemented and seen happening in many of the countries toward, how to increase, the demand, toward how to avoid stock out of products, toward, how to reach, the hard remote areas in the countries. So we have so many best practices that demonstrated if we put focus on them, if we act on those, we're gonna make, great progress. The challenge that we have now is how to scale them up And this would be one of our biggest priority for the year. The second priority that we're gonna get is, or facing is, how to involve more and address more youth and adolescent reproductive health. Specifically, if you look at our countries, more than 50% of the population are youth. And you cannot, avoid, this issue and look at, what is the youth issue and youth need and address, those needs. Demand creation, because I talked, how to large is the unmet need of family planning, but we are still facing with, those social norms that are both, blocking, impeding, our progress, and we will look and forward in working more and more with all those champions who are the driver for change in our countries, including faith-based organization. And I think being in this part of the world and looking at, those aspects, religion and family planning is something that we would like, to address more. Multi-sectorial approach, because when we discussed, last December in our annual meeting, we realized and we would like to emphasize more that family planning is not, should not be implemented in an isolated way, but we position family planning within the context of demographic dividend. I think this is really important that we see that, and when we are talking about multi-sectorial demographic dividend, of course, we need to see more and more collaboration within all the departments, all the ministers. So there are now a big push to go with the Ministry of Women, Ministry of Youth, the Ministry of Finance, of course, Women and Welfare, etc. Because I think we need, to partner and further our collaboration with those ministers. And of course, the resources. We need, and the focus would be also developing advocacy plan and using our advocates so that we can mobilize additional resources to ensure that we can, move forward. And to end, I would also like to say that our next phase, we call it, Ouagadougou Partnership. This is a phase for acceleration, because I think we have all the ingredients. What we need now is to act. What we need now is to accelerate, so that in 2020, we at our sub-region will contribute a lot with, reaching the overall goal of FP 2020, because we recognize that we are the regional arm of FP 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatimata. So Ellen and Jagdish, I have closing questions for you, but I'm going to ask that we all just stay here on the panel, because we have an exciting new element to our plenary today that I want to introduce now, and then I'll come back to both of you to help close the session. So if this panel would please stay on the stage, I'm going to be introducing our next speaker. So I don't know how many of you have been able to attend events related to the progress made by our colleagues from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Many of you might remember that they made their exciting announcement to join the FP 2020 partnership during the Addis Ababa conference, and at that time they laid out their program for action. Since that time, the country's made incredible progress, and the Prime Minister had wanted to join us all here in November to share with you the details of that progress. Unfortunately, he was unable to join us now that we've had to meet here in January instead. But he sent a delegation of 3 of his ministers from health, education, and planning to be with us all here during this week to share the incredible commitment of his government to ensuring that they take advantage of this opportunity under their commitment and their plan to grow their program. So with that, I'm going to be introducing the Minister of Health from the DRC, who will be introducing then a video from the Prime Minister. J'aimerais introduire maintenant Son Excellence Dr. Félix Kabange, ministre de la Santé publique en la République démocratique du Congo. Il est médecin de formation. À son actif, je note qu'il a géré avec succès 2 épisodes d'épidémie d'Ebola en 2012 et en 2014. Dans le domaine de la planification familiale, il a parrainé l'élaboration de la plan stratégique national de la planification à vision multisectorielle. Il a lancé sa mise en œuvre. Il a organisé la 3e conférence nationale pour le repositionnement de la planification familiale, ainsi que la première table ronde sur les jeunes et adolescents à Kinshasa. Et je note finalement qu'il a fait un plaidoyer pour la création d'une ligne budgétaire pour l'achat des contraceptifs. Je veux prier de lui accorder un accueil chaleureux pour l'introduction du message du Premier ministre de la République démocratique du Congo.
Leurs Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres et chers collègues, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du comité organisateur de la conférence, Mesdames et Messieurs les participants à vos titres et qualités respectifs, qu'il me soit permis, avant de prendre la parole du haut de cette tribune, et au nom du gouvernement de la République démocratique du Congo et des ministres du Plan et de l'Éducation qui font partie de la délégation à ces assises, de pouvoir remercier le président de la République d'Indonésie, l'ensemble des autorités politico-administratives ainsi que le peuple indonésien pour l'accueil dont notre délégation a été bénéficiaire. Nos remerciements s'adressent au comité organisateur ainsi qu'à tous les partenaires techniques et financiers qui ont permis et qui ont rendu possible la participation de la forte délégation de la République démocratique du Congo à ces assises. Tout juste après mon mot d'introduction, vous allez suivre la projection de l'allocution vidéo de Son Excellence, Monsieur le Premier ministre et chef du gouvernement. Sans abuser de votre patience, je voudrais juste, en guise d'introduction, partager avec vous quelques petites informations et statistiques de la République démocratique du Congo. La population de la République démocratique du Congo est estimée à ce jour à 83 millions d'habitants. Et si rien n'est fait, parce que cette population double tous les 25 ans, à l'horizon 2050, la République démocratique du Congo va compter 264 millions d'habitants. L'indice synthétique de fécondité de la RDC est de 6,6, avec une couverture contraceptive à 8,1 et des besoins non satisfaits en planning familial évalués à 28%. Je voudrais ici dire que depuis novembre 2013, la République démocratique du Congo a pris ses engagements internationaux et depuis lors, la République démocratique du Congo les respecte et avance dans la bonne direction. L'un des engagements, c'était la mobilisation des ressources domestiques. Par rapport justement à cet engagement, en 2014, la République démocratique du Congo a acheté des contraceptifs pour une valeur de 300 000 $ américains. Au moment où nous sommes ici, avant de venir, le gouvernement de la République démocratique du Congo venait de donner à l'UNFPA pour l'achat de contraceptifs un montant de 2 500 000 $ américains. Et pour pérenniser justement la planification familiale, la République démocratique du Congo vient de mettre dans son budget une ligne budgétaire spécifique pour l'achat des contraceptifs et pour le budget 2016, le montant est de 3 500 000 $ américains. Mesdames et messieurs, malgré ces efforts, un des défis majeurs que nous devons ensemble relever, c'est la mobilisation de 120 millions de dollars américains pour l'achat de contraceptifs pour 20 millions de femmes en âge de procréer pour la période allant de 2015 à 2020. À présent, mesdames et messieurs, je vous prie de suivre l'allocution vidéo de son Excellence Augustin Matata Ponyo Mapon, Premier ministre et chef du gouvernement de la République démocratique du Congo. Je vous remercie.
Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs, distingués invités, je n'ai malheureusement pas pu me joindre à vous pour cet événement exceptionnel. Je tiens cependant à vous témoigner de mon attachement singulier pour ces sujets relatifs à la planification familiale. Cette problématique constitue une priorité pour mon pays, la République démocratique du Congo, car par elle, nous prenons conscience du caractère central de l'homme en tant qu'acteur principal du développement. C'est ainsi que nos efforts combinés sur le champ de l'économie, de la justice, de la sécurité, de l'éducation et de la santé sont déployés précisément à l'aune de cette thématique. Au fin de mieux servir la population congolaise et garantir l'émergence dès 2030, mon gouvernement, sous le leadership du président de la République Joseph Kabila Kabange, a engagé un programme ambitieux de réformes visant un renouveau en créant les conditions propices au développement socio-économique de notre pays. La marche de la RDC vers l'atteinte des objectifs de développement a été envisagée à travers l'exécution du plan national stratégique de développement dont le programme d'action du gouvernement constitue la composante opérationnelle. À cet effet, un chronogramme des échéances a été défini. Il prévoit que de 2012 à 2020, la République démocratique du Congo accède à la catégorie des pays à revenus intermédiaires sur fond d'une transformation de l'agriculture. De 2021 à 2030, la République démocratique du Congo ambitionne de figurer au rang des pays émergents à la faveur d'une industrialisation intensive de son économie. De 2031 à 2050, mon pays devrait se développer davantage du fait de la création d'une société basée sur la diffusion du savoir et des connaissances. Pour pouvoir atteindre ces objectifs, les efforts doivent porter tant sur l'augmentation de la croissance, de la production, que sur la planification familiale. Nous sommes pertinemment conscients, en effet, qu'une croissance démographique non maîtrisée risquerait de constituer un facteur entravant. Les projections démographiques indiquent que d'ici 2030, la population congolaise va doubler et qu'en 2050, la RDC pourra compter plus de 260 millions d'habitants. Par contre, des actions combinant l'éducation des jeunes, la prise en charge en matière de santé, la promotion et l'utilisation des services de planification familiale peuvent ralentir de manière significative cette tendance haussière. Les ralentissements de la croissance de la population, conjugués à l'amélioration du capital humain et de la gouvernance, auront des effets bénéfiques sur la croissance économique et la réduction de la pauvreté en République démocratique du Congo. À cet effet, mon gouvernement engage le pays à atteindre une prévalence contraceptive d'au moins 19% en 2020, 39% en 2030 et environ 50% à l'horizon 2050. Sous la houlette de son Excellence Joseph Kabila Kabange, président de la République, mon gouvernement a initié des projets ambitieux dont la vocation est d'améliorer sensiblement la qualité de vie de la population grâce à un meilleur accès à l'éducation et aux soins de santé. Dans le secteur de l'éducation, le taux de scolarisation a augmenté et l'indice de parité s'est sensiblement amélioré. Toutefois, des efforts additionnels doivent encore se déployer pour garantir à tous les enfants, filles et garçons, un accès aisé à la scolarisation. En plus de la reconstruction et la modernisation des infrastructures scolaires, le gouvernement s'emploie à améliorer la qualité des programmes scolaires et la formation des enseignants. Dans le domaine de la santé, des progrès majeurs ont été également enregistrés ces dernières années, notamment en ce qui concerne la vaccination, la lutte contre le paludisme et la tuberculose. Toutefois, des réformes doivent encore être opérées afin d'assurer une couverture sanitaire universelle pour l'ensemble de la population congolaise. Le gouvernement est conscient de la nécessité d'élargir davantage l'accès aux soins de santé, d'accroître la prévention contre certaines maladies, d'améliorer la qualité des prestations du corps médical en vue de réduire la mortalité infantile et maternelle. Pour ce faire, mon gouvernement a adhéré à la stratégie mondiale pour la santé des femmes, des enfants et des adolescents dans la fourchette 2016-2030 préconisée par le secrétaire général des Nations Unies. À cet effet, nous réaffirmons nos engagements à mettre tout en œuvre pour réduire d'au moins 50% les taux de décès maternels, infantiles et juvéniles à l'horizon 2030. Nous nous engageons aussi à développer de nouvelles politiques en matière de santé sexuelle des adolescents, des mariages précoces, des traitements des enfants, des promotions de l'égalité des sexes et de planification familiale. Nous nous engageons aussi à mettre en place des mécanismes de subvention en faveur de la planification familiale et en faveur des soins obstétricaux d'urgence pour les vulnérables. Nous nous engageons enfin à accroître les dépenses publiques de santé afin d'améliorer la santé et le bien-être des femmes, des enfants et des adolescents. Le défi est énorme, mais peut être relevé. Avec la tendance de l'amélioration du contexte sécuritaire, à l'approfondissement des réformes, à l'amélioration de la gouvernance, à la consolidation et à l'inclusivité de la croissance et à la diversification des bases productives de l'économie, la République démocratique du Congo réalisera des avancées importantes en matière de développement humain d'ici 2030, l'échéance pour les objectifs de développement durable. Les bénéfices tirés de l'investissement de la planification familiale serviront à investir davantage dans les secteurs clés de l'éducation, de la santé, de l'environnement, de l'habitat, ainsi de suite. La délégation ministérielle congolaise à vos assises aura l'occasion de vous présenter avec plus de détails les actions concrètes menées par le gouvernement de la RDC dans leurs secteurs respectifs. Mesdames et messieurs, distingués invités, je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
My thanks again to the distinguished delegation from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And please convey our gratitude to the Prime Minister for sharing his thoughts and your progress with us here today. Thank you. So with that, we're coming to the close of this plenary, but I wanted to end by asking each of our panelists here to share a challenge with all of you. What would they like you to all do when you return home? And
What are your words there? Jagdish, let's start with you since I cut short the discussion earlier.
You know, somebody said that if you want to predict your future, you better create it. And that's what we need to do it. And I look at young people and see that how next 15 years, what we need to do it to make the family planning as a basic core issues. And it's not sideline, as I gave the example earlier. I think what we need to do is to see that and keep this picture of 15 years old girl for next 15 years, girl or boy. You know, we have to see that if you have to be given choice and to decide your family, you have to make you have to contribute in workforce. You have to go to school and remain in the school. You have to have a power of deciding when you have to be pregnant or not to have pregnancy. And the family planning is the core value that we need to continue doing it. I think there are 3-4 things that many successful countries have done it. And probably we can take some of that lessons for our discussion today. The family planning were, in some of those countries where family planning is successful, the first thing they started doing is to build the human resources for health. They build the capacity of the people to deliver family planning program. And unless you have that human resources for health, I think it becomes very difficult. Other countries also, the successful country also build the health system. And then they kept the family planning, you know, the whole supply chain management and everything they created. But before doing all that, I think you have to have evidence, and what we call is either you call it health strategy or costed implementation plan. You have to have evidence for next 5 years, how much it cost, and in terms of universality, not only in terms of averages, because sometimes national averages mask the challenges, and you will not see the marginalized people and young people, you know, if they are having access or not. So having that kind of evidence, building human resources, building health system, strengthening, are some of the most important thing. And then the civil society, young people, and everyone will be watchful that every time the budget is declining, the first thing is cut is the family planning. So you need to be very watchful to see that this is not about only health, but to give the right and the choice and the future of all of us for next 15 years. In terms of our work in FP 2020, in all those 69 countries, which are our focus countries, what we are doing is under the leadership of the government, USAID and UNFPA, we are convening the whole partnership. And I will urge all of you to join us to see that the things that we are talking about, the costed implementation plan or health strategy, which is a very strongly developed at the country level. So any discussion about financing, any discussion of GFF, or any discussion about health and budget and insurance, universal insurance, you have evidence to go back and say that this is my requirement and this is what has to be fulfilled because I have to take care of my future. I think that kind of discussion at the country level, because the sustainability in family planning happens at the country level. And I think we need to take charge of this in every country. And we in FP 2020, and again, when I say FP 2020, it's all of us. It's not one agency. It's everybody who is here is FP 2020. It becomes our responsibility that some of those evidence and those systems are in place, and so that we can take charge of it. Next time when we are here after 2 years in another conference, we should not go through the same example as I gave you earlier, that the budget cut was there, it was not included a health insurance, and there is a complete health inequalities and not accessible of contraceptives. I think we have to be watchful, we have to continue doing it, and I truly trust young people and all other partners who are here to carry forward this torch. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagdish. That was a really comprehensive answer, and from that I'm going to push out that nugget that each of us needs to participate at whatever level and whatever process we can in order to move things forward. Ellen, what's your challenge to the audience for what you would like them to do as they leave Bali today?
There's so much that needs to be done. But I think making a commitment to expanding method choice and doing that in a way that the method of choice, the basket of choices, is available, affordable, acceptable, accessible, and that individuals have agency to access it is what's going to drive us towards making it a reality for people to choose the number, timing, and spacing of their children voluntarily and free of coercion. So what I would like to ask you all to do is to make a commitment before you leave here to work on that issue. Make that commitment in a public way. Go to the FP Voices photo booth, take a picture, put some language under there. Do it on Facebook, do it on Twitter, do it in whatever way it becomes a public commitment. And then when you go home, make it a reality. Be a champion, engage, be bold, and don't look back.
Thank you, Ellen. That was really inspiring. And I love that you brought in the many ways that people have found to communicate through this conference, especially FP Voices. It's just been sort of a smash hit, and I think it's been a lot of fun for people to be able to put their thoughts and their dreams out there for family planning. Fatimata, what's your challenge to the audience?
Thank you, Beth. We are in 2016, and we have just 4 years to go before the end of the timeline that we set for ourselves toward this global commitment we all made. I think my final word or my recommendation is it's time for us to act. We have now proven approaches. We have proven interventions that can make the difference. We have created momentum. So my expectation is that we accelerate, the way, and we implement, we act, so that in 2012, we all together can get up and face with the entire world, face with, the woman and the girl, and say them, we have kept our promises. So I think action, 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 so that we reach the goal and we keep our promise.
Thank you, Fatimata. That sense of urgency as we drive toward 2020 and that integrity behind our commitments is so central to all of this. So thank you for that impassioned plea. Poonam, the final word is yours.
So family planning, as we understand, is advancing sexual and reproductive rights. It saves lives of women and children, empowers communities. Especially, we have to look at young people. And I would like to say that as we go back, there is choice in family planning while we ensure that, but there is no choice to not invest in young people, in family planning. And as far as young people are concerned, no compromise on comprehensive sexuality education. The world has accepted elementary education to include 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. I'd like to add a 4th R, namely reproductive sexual health education.
That's a great idea, and I fully embrace your 4 R's. Thank you for ensuring that the needs of young people and the critical moment that we have to ensure that we're hearing from young people and moving forward with them are a critical part of that process. So with that, I'd like you to please thank our panelists for joining us here today. And I want to thank all of you as well. As Jagdish said, FP 2020 is meant to be a part of this movement, that we are the family planning movement, and that FP 2020 is all of us. So thank you for partnering with us. Thank you for sharing with us your ideas about how we can do this better. And thank you again for welcoming us here today during this plenary. And I just want to wish you all an excellent last day here at the conference and to thank you for being with us. Bye-bye.